Bakit po parang ang taas dito sa Lopez loan? On average, you have a 30%. Bakit po sa kanila nasa 64%?
I think that when we walk through some of the collections, iba-iba po yan. Ano? When we look at these types of loans, there are loans that are completely unsecured with companies that have absolutely no ability to repay, and those would be even single digit sometimes. So when we look at these portfolios, especially for exposures this large, we would look to the ability, the inherent ability of the borrower to repay. So you will find that, or if you will remember, these loans from the Lopez Group were actually sold in auction. There were maybe 4 or 5 participants for these auctions, and the prices seemed fairly close. So I think we had arrived at a market clearing price for each of these Lopez Group loans.
So, if it's sold at 64%, ito na po, personal na po to,
Yes,
from your investment banking point of view. At 64%, kung kayo po may hawak ng loans na to, hindi nyo ibibenta. Ibig sabihin, these are still very, very potential collectible loans.
Yes, sir. What if I may put myself in the BP shoes, because they were the seller and we simply bid in their portfolio.
Yes, sir.
Ang nangyayari po niyan, because they, under the SPB Act, most of the banks, if not all of the banks, were capital constrained at that point in time. So na-realize po nila, kung ibibenta nila isa-isa yan, ang mabibili lang talaga yung may ability to repay, yung may collateral, yung may guarantee, yung may payment ability. And that was why I think also based on the Ernst & Young and ACRA advice to DPP, and this is what happens globally, sir, they would package these loans in portfolios na merong magaganda, makabayad, at merong alanganin. Because if they don't package that way, ang mabibili lang po sa kanila, yung magaganda, ang maiwan sa kanila, the worst credits, which will make banking life even tougher. So I think, and if I understand correctly, the way DPP did this, they took an advisor and said, this is the best way to package this. Ihalo-halo nyo, merong maganda, may pangit para yung bibili. They have no choice. Now, among the portfolio that we had bought with the Lopez Group loans, meron po talaga, as I mentioned, meron kaming 9-figure loans ngayon na hindi pa nababayaran, but these were some of the better credits within the portfolios that were sold by DPP.
Yes, I agree, Mr. Manalac. So in the cherry picking of accounts, nasa high side yung Lopez accounts sold at 64%, which basically, and you're correct, I agree with you, kung ako po ang DBP, hindi ko binenta. Ngayon, my next question would be, Mr. Manalac, kasi po dapat mafo-foreclose na sila ng DBP. Pero hindi ho sila foreclose. When it was transferred to you, what was the term or how long were they able to fix the issue?
My understanding, just looking at the cash flows that came in, Honorable Defensor, was that we basically, or these loans were basically held almost as passive investments. And the reason for that is that 2 of the loans were already in rehab. And I think a third one, Central CATV, was either in restructuring or in rehab. So in that situation po, the creditor becomes very passive, ano? Yung rehabilitation receiver says, oh, eto, pwede ka na magbayad or hindi ka pwede magbayad. So we, as the owner of that credit at this point in time, will be simply receiving any cash flows approved by the court. And then in certain instances, such as may NILAD, or in this case, buy and tell, eventually, I think must have been in the 2008 through 2010 period, merong buyer of the debt or merong buyer of the company and says, look, bibilin ko na lang exposure mo. But if I'm looking at these loans, and given the experience we had with some of the other loans we have, based on the records, it looked like these loans were managed very passively. Meron nga pong rehab, so naghihintay na lang kami. And then may dumating na buyer, parang may dumating na buyer, sabi, oh sige, ibenta nyo na. There are some loans, not including these, in the business that are very intensively managed po, ano, na tinatawagan nyo yung account holder, anong masisettle, anong collateral nyo, pwede nating, do you need more liquidity? Based on the records, is looking at some of these cash flows and the fact that these companies were mostly in rehab or under restructuring. These were passively managed because of the nature of the credit, sir.
So Mr. Manalac, more or less, from the transfer to the SPV, nabigyan pa sila ng about 3 to 4 years to fix or to recover the loans.
Yes, sir. It looks that way. It looks like the collections were basically around the 2007 to 2010 period.
Yes. So, Mr. Manalac, from you bought it for 1,069,000,000, magkano nyo po naibenta?
Yung total collections po, no, yung total collections, I just want to speak globally because hindi pa po pino yung information namin, ano, but
Yes.
we are trying to find.
Yes.
Yung based on the records that we have, the total collections on the Lopez group of loans from DBP was about 1.25 billion. There was, if you look at the Annex A of our position paper, ang total na nakuha po ng Lehman from the Lopez Group loans is 1.45 billion. But apparently, and we just traced this late last night, if you look at our annex, there is a column at the very bottom, Central CATB. It looks like there was a purchase of Central CATB from a third party, sir. Aside from DBP, where there were additional collections. So the collections from the DBP Lopez Group loans was about 1.25 billion. If you want, I can go quickly to how much was collected for the Maynilad in Central CATB, sir. These were mostly, by the time the whole process was finished, these were paid at around par, so around 100%, maybe slightly less or slightly more. Yung Maynilad po at yung Central CATB. Yung Benpress, the total collection for Benpress was about 60% of the face value. And the total collections for Buy and Tell, which is the second largest exposure, was about 30% of face value.
So, yeah. Thank you, Mr. Manalac. If I may, Mr. Manalac, hindi naman po, you don't have to answer, but the narrative of what happened was, so maganda, 64% itong accounts na to, the 4 Lopez accounts. And in fact, DBP, yung pong ginawa nila, made a separate board discussion to put together the Lopez accounts. Again, it was also to package the entire thing. Mr. Aguilar was there as part of Credit Committee Assistant Manager. They were discussing it, and then later on, they put it as part of the 9 billion. Nilagay na po dun sa 9 billion para mapaganda yung buong package. So instead of foreclosing, because of the 180 days, nilagay po sa SPAB ninyo, which wala naman po kayong kasalanan. It was a business deal. Due diligence was conducted by Ernst & Young. You made a bid. But by doing that, you extended the loan for 3 to 4 years. Sometime 2007, 2010, nabayaran po lahat yan. And technically, yung binili ninyong 1.069 billion, naibenta nyo ng 1.25 billion. So, si government lost about 600 billion pesos. But from what you're saying, if only government waited, Maynilad and Central CATV would have gotten 100% of what was loaned, of what was borrowed from them, and maybe more. So ito po yung kabuuang kwento, Mr. Manalac, of what transpired. Is this correct? The correct narrative of what transpired?
Honorable Defensor, I would, because again from our records, it looks like these assets were passively managed. Hindi naman po to, as far as we know, walang kumatok sa Lopez Group. No, we were in rehab. These loans were in rehab. So you're correct in the sense that if the DBP had waited, on the resolution of these loans. They seem to have basically paid for themselves over the 3-year period. The only other consideration I would make, sir, is that maybe if the DBP loans were not part of the portfolio, then they may not have gotten the pricing that they got on the other portfolio, sir. Kasi kung wala yung maganda, maybe mas mababa yung bid namin doon sa completely non-performing loan, sir. Yun lang po.
Yes, I understand. Yeah. So thank you, Mr. Manalac, and I apologize for bothering you with these questions. But what you pointed out are the points that you raised, and the facts that you gave us are very enlightening. Maraming salamat po.